What's up, Thrive Youth? We believe that each and every one of you guys has a story to tell, a faith to live out, and an impact to make right where you're at. We believe that each and every one of you guys is a missionary, even when you're stuck in quarantine. If this is your first time here with us, dude, welcome. We're so glad to have you. Be sure to leave a comment down below or send one of us a DM, as we have a free gift that we want to send you just for hanging out with us. In a few moments, one of our worship leaders, Alondra, is going to come and lead us in worship through song. After that, Johnny's going to kick off our new Easter series. Then all of us are going to jump onto a Zoom video call chat where we're going to just hang out, chat, and play a couple games. So you're going to want to look into the chat down below, as you're going to see the code and password to get into that Zoom call. With that all being said, come on, let's stand up, turn up your volume, and let's sing.
time for fake grass, plastic eggs, these things, chocolate bunnies, and people dressed as bunnies. And then there are the weird parts of Easter, like fake grass, plastic eggs, these things, chocolate bunnies, and people dressed as bunnies, which is interesting. But what does all this stuff have to do with Easter? And if this holiday is about more than candy and wearing uncomfortable clothes to church and lunch with your relatives, what makes Easter happy?
Well, happy Easter! At least I hope it was a happy Easter for you. I hope that your family was still able to celebrate Easter even in the midst of a quarantine. See, I don't know how you guys celebrated Easter, but this year it was honestly just super different than all the rest. And even if you aren't a Christian and you don't celebrate Easter, Easter is honestly one of the best times of the year. I mean, think about it. Easter usually means spring break, although for you guys this year it's kind of ruined. Easter usually means that you're allowed to eat an unreal amount of candy, almost as much as Halloween, but only as long as it looks like an egg or a bunny. Us guys get the chance to wear pink shirts around Easter without anybody thinking twice about it. And if your family is anything like my family, if you guys do an Easter egg hunt, Easter means that you get the chance to see Aunt Susie's competitive side rear its ugly head. Easter also means that parents all over the world are going to force their kids to take photos with a man in a rabbit costume. See, in this series that we're going to start tonight, simply called Happy Easter, we're going to talk about some of the reasons why Easter is happy and why it's such a big deal for people who are Jesus followers. See, throughout this series, we are going to talk about not only what we celebrate at Easter, but also why we as Christians get to have such joy in saying Happy Easter. But before we get there, let's talk about that last thing for just a second. See, let's talk about the Easter bunny. Does the idea of going nuts for a 6-foot-tall bunny that lays eggs annoy any of you guys? See, I know I can't be the only one who isn't a fan of that bunny. I know these people don't like it. See, most people actually mean it when they say Happy Easter, though for the people in those pictures, I'm not so sure it's all that happy. There does not seem to be a whole lot of joy going on there. And even though your family is probably not going to make you dress up and sit with a giant bunny this Easter, I think we all know that feeling of being, well, scared. See, we all know that fear can take away our happiness almost faster than anything. For most of us, we've felt some form of fear since we were little kids. See, whether it was a monster in the closet or under the bed, or maybe it was breaking or losing a favorite toy. Don't tell my daughter I have this. Maybe for you, a fear was being in the dark, or even getting hurt and having to miss out on all kinds of fun. See, fear can wreck our sense of peace and happiness. As you got older, your fears likely transferred to other things. Maybe you were afraid of failing classes, or maybe you were afraid of being rejected by friends, or maybe you were afraid of doing something embarrassing and getting it caught on one of these things and posted all over social media. Maybe you were like me and you were afraid of not making it on your favorite team. For me, it was wrestling. I was always afraid of not being good enough for the team. Maybe you were afraid, like me, as well, of getting rejected by that cute girl that you wanted to talk to. See, your fear looked different than when you were a kid, but the feeling is still very real. And now you're going through school and you've probably figured out that you don't just grow out of fear. No, as you grow up, fear just grows up with you. And maybe you don't call it fear, maybe you call it stress or feeling anxious or being worried, but no matter what you call it, you probably fear something. I mean, we all do. Maybe for you, it's the fear of not fitting in. Maybe it's the fear of not keeping the right GPA or being afraid of not getting into the college of your choice. Maybe especially during this time, you have a fear about your health. Maybe you're afraid for the relationships of the people you love. Maybe you're just afraid of the future, of not amounting to anything or not having any real significance or impact in life. Whatever your particular fear is, you don't need me to tell you that it's very real to you. See, the reality is that fear is on the rise. In fact, chances are good that some of you guys watching right now, fear is determining the direction of your life. See, we're not making decisions to do or not do things based on fear. See, we're avoiding people or conversations that need to happen because they freak us out. We're numbing ourselves out for hours on our phones or on Netflix or on video games because we don't want to acknowledge the feelings of stress or fear that we have inside of us. See, whether we realize it or not, fear is actually fueling a lot of our thoughts and actions. And here is what's really interesting about all of this. See, if we were to boil it down, there is one fear that connects all of our fears: the fear of death. And now you may be thinking, wow, Johnny, that just took a dark turn. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of getting a bad grade in history. I'm not sure what that has to do with dying. See, but this is not just about physical death. It's about the end of something, the death of something. For example, think about it in relationship to some of the fears that you have right now. We're afraid of really truly being ourselves because we think that if people knew the real us, they'd freak out. They'd run for the hills, and their friendship with us would end. It would die. See, their interest in being our friend would be over. We're afraid of not getting into the college of our dreams because if our application gets rejected, that dream is dead. We're afraid of getting busted or found out when it comes to something secretive in our own lives because that would mean that other people's image of us would have to die. See, whether it is physical death or just the death of something we hope for, the fear of death comes down to losing something that we think that we will never get back. And when you think of it that way, it's easy to connect almost every one of our fears back to a fear of death. See, death seems final. It's like fear's knockout punch that gives it its victory. So if our fears come true and a friendship ends, a goal isn't reached or a dream dies, and then we get to the end of our lives to realize that death defeats us once and for all, it's just flat out devastating. See, there's no hope in that. There's nothing happy about that. But that's exactly where Easter comes in, right in the middle of our fear of death. As we think about Easter, most of us know this holiday isn't actually about eggs or bunnies or chocolate. See, for those of us who follow Jesus, this is the time of the year that we celebrate how the God of the universe, the creator of everything, the all-knowing, the all-powerful one, came to earth, died on a cross as a criminal, and then 3 days later, when nobody expected it, he rose from the dead. See, that is what the big deal is about Easter. It changed everything, and it especially changed the life of a guy named Paul. See, if you don't know who Paul is one of the most famous Christians in history. See, before he became a Jesus follower, he spent years trying to scare Christians into leaving the faith, using death as the ultimate threat. But then he met Jesus, like the used to be dead and not dead anymore Jesus, and it changed everything. See, this guy who used to threaten Christians' lives became the greatest missionary of all time. He was shipwrecked, imprisoned, threatened, beaten, and bitten by a venomous snake, and so much more. But he kept going because he was so passionate about people understanding the significance of Jesus' death and resurrection. See, Paul's life was constantly in danger. In fact, he was eventually killed for his faith. And despite all of that, Paul seemed to live without a fear of death. And in one of Paul's letters, we can see why. Paul writes a letter to his church in the ancient city called Corinth. He reminds people that Jesus died and came back to life by his own power 3 days later. And then listen to what Paul writes about what that means for us. See, Paul tells us, death is swallowed up in victory. Oh, death, where is your victory? Oh, death, where is your sting? See, it's like Paul is taunting the very idea of death by reminding the Corinthian church that on Easter, death lost to Jesus. See, when Jesus died and then rose again, he defeated death and unleashed resurrection power for all who follow him. See, and that means that because of the resurrection, death can no longer defeat us. See, we are now a people of resurrection, of renewed life. The power that death has over our relationships, reputations, future hopes and dreams, and even over our physical bodies, it's gone. Thanks to what Jesus did on Easter, on the cross, we no longer have to fear any kind of death because Jesus destroyed death once and for all. See, after Jesus hung on a cross and was placed in the tomb, it seemed like humanity's greatest fear had come true. See, death was the ultimate thing to fear. To Jesus' followers, it seemed like his death was final. The dream was over. But then, Jesus walked out of the tomb alive and proved that even the power of death is not strong enough to overcome his power. See, this is why Paul was able to live the way that he did, no longer fearing death. It's why he didn't seem to fear much of anything in his life after he encountered Jesus. He seemed to realize that the scariest things are not the most powerful things. The things that we fear don't have the same power that Jesus does. And Paul trusted that the fears that he faced were no match for the power of the resurrected Jesus. See, in other words, Easter means that fear is not final. See, if Jesus can defeat death, he can defeat the things that you're afraid of too. Fear will try to convince you that it gets the final word, that at the end of the day, it will win. Fear will try to convince you that you're not good enough, that you'll never find a purpose, or that your life is not worth it. Fear will try to make you listen and obey it. Fear wants power over you. But here's the truth. Fear is only powerful if it can convince you that it is final. Fear will try to make you believe that nothing is stronger than what you're afraid of right now. But when Jesus defeated death itself, he showed us that nothing, no thing that we fear is bigger than him. See, nothing we fear is stronger than him. He showed us that fear, no matter what we're afraid of, does not get the final say. Now you may be thinking, you can't just tell me that because Jesus rose again, I don't have to be afraid of anything, even death. See, I'm still anxious. I'm still depressed. I'm still terrified of what's lying ahead. And I'm still afraid of what's happening right now, Johnny. I understand. Even if fear doesn't get the final word, that doesn't mean that things aren't still going to be worth being afraid of. See, there are things, real things, big things that cause us to be afraid. And it's not a guarantee that something you're afraid of won't happen, but it does mean that you are more equipped than ever to handle those things than you may ever have realized. See, Paul says it this way in Romans. The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead, he lives in you. Stop and think about that for a second. Paul is saying that the same power that defeated death 2,000 years ago when Jesus rose from the dead, it's actually inside of people like you and me who believe in Jesus today. See, maybe that's why Paul seemed to live free from so many of the fears that we typically faced. And if you and I could embrace the significance of Easter in our own lives, maybe we could live that way too. As a Jesus follower, you have the power that brought Jesus back to life. It lives inside of you, and that means that fear does not get to tell you what to do. See, you may have come here tonight and confronted by all sorts of fears, but just know that if Jesus defeated death, the Spirit of Jesus who defeated death can live in you. See, imagine what his Spirit can do in the face of the things that you're afraid of. So let me ask you this. Where has fear been holding you back? Is fear holding you back in your relationships? Is fear holding you back from dreaming big about your future? Is fear holding you back from going to college? Is fear holding you back from dealing with something concerning your mental health that you're just too afraid to acknowledge? Is fear holding you back from doing something that you know that you should do, no matter what it does to your reputation? Is fear holding you back from actually exploring your faith in Jesus? Because up to this point, you've been afraid of how your life might actually change. You may have been afraid of what you might have to do. See, wherever fear has been holding you back, with Jesus' help, you can take a step towards facing that fear today. What step you should take? That's up to you. Maybe it's forgiving someone. Maybe you need to apologize to somebody. Maybe you need to talk to a school counselor. Maybe you need to talk to a doctor and start a conversation. Maybe you need to tell your parents something that you've never told them. Maybe you need to talk to your small group leader and ask for help dealing with something that you've been afraid to deal with. Maybe you just need to pick a new friend group that's better for you. Maybe you need to ask honest questions that you've been having about Christianity, because let me give you a little hint. Christianity can take your questions. It's been around for a while. See, this Easter, no matter what your step is, you can begin to face your fear because of Jesus. Because of what we celebrate at Easter, what Jesus did for us, fear does not get to determine the direction of our lives any longer. I don't know what your step is, but I do know this. If you are someone who believes that Jesus defeated death and you submit your life to his authority and follow him, then you have resurrection power inside of you. And because of that, you can handle whatever fear throws at you, no matter how scary it seems. Remember, you're not facing fear by yourself anymore. See, you are relying on the power of the one who defeated your greatest fear once and for all. See, Jesus took away death's power, its victory, its sting, and that means that you don't have to worry about anything being more powerful than Jesus. See, this is the hope that the Christian faith is built upon. This is what caused Paul to live free from fear. This is what makes Easter such a big deal. See, while the rest of the world lives controlled by fear, driven by stress, you and I, we don't have to. We are free. And that freedom is why we can honestly say, Happy Easter.
It is such a blessing that even though we're forced to be apart, we have the wonderful gift of technology that still allows us to hang out and talk to one another even though we're separated. All that we have left is a Zoom call that we're all going to get on, and we're just going to hang out, chat, and play a bunch of games. If you look down below in the chat, there should be a link and code that'll get you into the call. If that doesn't work, feel free to send a text or message any one of your leaders, and we will be sure to let you get in there. We'll see you guys soon.